Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at another Devblog for the next major update, and this time it's for the Super Etendard, which is a vehicle which was on the dev server, but I feel like wasn't in its full extent. This is going to be a strike naval aircraft for the French. It's also going to be coming in at rank 7, which is kind of crazy. This means that it won't get an air spawn in a realistic, which could kind of hurt its abilities, since of course it isn't the fastest aircraft in the world. It doesn't have an afterburner, but can be quite speedy, just not really Mach capable. It does have a lot of other systems though to keep it competitive, so we'll have a look into them. As always, let's have a look at the history of the vehicle. The Super Etendard carrier-based attack aircraft was a further development of the Etendard 4, which featured improved flight performance, a radar, and precision-guided weapons. The first flight of this updated variant took place in 1974, and after a number of modifications, the Super Etendard was accepted into service in 1978. Serial production lasted until 1983, and in addition to the French Navy, a batch of this aircraft was ordered by Argentina, which successfully operated it in combat during the Falklands War. The French Super Etendard received its baptism of fire in Lebanon in 1983, where the French Navy suffered its first losses of the aircraft. Sometime later, the Super Etendard was leased by the Iraqi government and was used to disrupt Iranian shipping in the Persian Gulf. The Super Etendard is another one of these vehicles which is going to heavily rely on its weaponry. There's been a ton of them that have been added to the game more recently, and to be honest, they've become some of the most unbalanced vehicles in the game itself, whether being too powerful or really not powerful enough. The greatest examples of this type of aircraft is stuff like the A-10 and the Su-25, which dominated the meta for, I don't know, at least half a year when they came out, and that's because they had some pretty crazy weaponry on board, and a lot of vehicles that fought them weren't able to counter them. When it comes to the Super Etendard, it's going to be no different. This vehicle has paveways, the good old GBU-12 Paveway 2 bombs. It also has access to Magic 1 missiles, so not the all-aspect magics, but still the very powerful magics, which you will find on many different vehicles. And then also, it does get the 30mm, and at least on the dev server, did have access to countermeasures too. It can also carry a bunch of different armaments, including some general bombs. It also has a pretty powerful targeting pod on top of it, so this is another one of those vehicles that, even though it has a better engine than the standard Etendard, it has the Snecmaratar 8K50 power plant, doesn't mean that it's going to be able to go faster than many of the things it's going to face. So it's going to heavily rely on its weaponry to get the job done. So depending on the BR of this thing, it could be really powerful, or it couldn't be really powerful. Like, if you have a look at the 11.3 Su-25s right now, they're really not something that, you know, people are having fun with. Even the newer one with the R-73, it's just getting murked, and that's because its optics aren't good enough for the ground ordnance, and it doesn't matter what air-to-air missiles you strap to something, if it is not able to move around the air at a decent click, people know how to play around these things, and if they have countermeasures, can obviously stop the missiles. And that's what's probably going to happen with this thing if they decide to put it too high in BR. Something I found really fun with the Mirage 5F, which I basically used as a 2 magic missile bus, was the maneuverability of the vehicle. Was able to dodge a lot of different missiles that were coming in, but what mattered the most in playing it was the setup of the vehicle. So going to a place, waiting for initial battles to start, picking off targets, and then going from there. This meant that I actually did pretty well in the Mirage 5F, but one of the key differences between the Mirage 5F and the Super Etendard is the speed, and the speed is going to be the real killer for this Super Etendard machine. The moment that it starts to turn, or the moment that it starts to move around the place, it's really going to bleed a lot of speed, and since it doesn't have that afterburner acceleration, it's going to have a tough time gaining it once again to get up to those speeds to be able to be combat effective. So I feel like when I look at this vehicle, it's not going to be anywhere near as powerful as like the Jaguar A, for example, or even the Mirage 5F. What this is going to have a limited use in stuff like ground forces, where people are going to use the guided bombs for from very high to be able to donk on a lot of targets, and then when it comes to aviation, it's going to be used in a way where it's just a magic missile launcher, and then that's really about it, because you won't be able to do anything else with it. The standard Etendard kind of has this problem too, where it really doesn't handle very well. Like, it's not a vehicle which has great flight characteristics, so once again you're just relying on the ordnance. And the more ordnance that you pack on the machine, the heavier that it gets, and the worse the flight performance gets, you know, and pretty much as simple as that. It is quite nice that in one of the images they kind of show the folded wings on the Super Etendard. Maybe at some point we will actually have that added to the game. There is actually a ton of vehicles which can fold parts of their wings. The Buccaneer, for example, is one of them. That would be really nice to see, and a lot of the World War II aircraft, especially from the Fleet Air Arm, can also fold their wings. And some of them can actually, when it comes to the files, like they do have the animation sorted, so hopefully at some point that can happen. Does have a fully maneuverable elevator, so maybe that'll mean that this thing can pull quite hard, and then you're able to use the countermeasures to get away from the missiles. Then you can use your missiles to counter the enemy. We'll have a really nice cockpit for the simulator guys, and also people who really like that stuff. But at the end of the day, I just wish it was a little bit faster. Like, the speed does make a big difference for these vehicles which have crazy amounts of ordnance. We've seen over the last few years that if you have a vehicle that doesn't have good mobility in the air but has these crazy weapons, it's so hard to balance that it's either, you know, way too good or way too bad, which is why trainer vehicles, when they have like insane weaponry but can only go like, you know, 500 to 800 kilometers an hour, are going to be so hard to balance in this game, even though I know there's a few sets of people who want them. And the Super Etendard is going to be another one of those vehicles. Either very good because of the BR that they put it at, like if they put it at like 9.7 or 10.0, it's going to be very powerful of a vehicle. But if they put it higher, you know, against more of the monsters, especially if they have more countermeasures, then it's really going to struggle in that area and not do very well. So it's kind of, hopefully this vehicle finds a place, and hopefully it has a good time. Hopefully in a realistic it won't just get annihilated because of the fact it doesn't get an air spawn, and hopefully in ground it gets left alone enough to be able to use the guided bombs to a good effect. You know, that we've shown with the French, especially with the Jaguar, it is possible to use these machines in that role, and they can be very effective at it. So I'm hoping that the Super Etendard's the same. The only thing that will make it so that's the case is if it lines up well BR-wise with a ground lineup, which is very important, and then also on top of it, that it's able to defend itself against the SBAs on the ground. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Brendan Quinn, Vilneus, Character Fuel, Juan the Panda, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie, B. Young, Bareen, Peter Grayling, Alan Hacker, Sem Alslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R., and also Lafouche for supporting the channel.